Hello there. Namaste. So this is a documentary on ancient Indian warfare, and I'm actually excited to watch this because a lot of weapons that still, well, and now weapons like firearms and things like that have taken over, but never truly were mastered anywhere else. Like there's that blade, which was like some kind of aluminum that you would wear as like a belt, and it's just, I could never handle that thing. That thing would be far too difficult, but that was like an actual weapon. I thought that was fantasy made up until I found out that it was real. So it's fascinating to kind of, I want to learn more of that. I want to learn more of the actual weapons that were used and how expertly they were used. Because I clearly had no clue that some of the weapons I thought were fantasy were actual reality. It's fun to know that you get to learn more.
For outstanding performance in sports and games, the Government of India honors 2 awards, Arjuna and Dronacharya Awards. These awards represent a rich legacy of a teacher-student relationship and also how deep archery is into the Indian history. DHANURVEDAM is a branch of Vedas, which is the foundational scripture for not just archery but the complete science of warfare in ancient India. Conflict resolution in ancient India is of 4 levels. The first level is Sama, through negotiating with the enemy state and resolving the conflict, or Dana, by creating an alliance with the enemy state and turning them into your friends. The third level is Beda, by intimidating the enemy, and the fourth level is Danda, by finally waging a war if necessary. DHANURVEDAM governs how the final stage of
Whoa. So, it's Indian warfare. So I guess they'll get to embrace like how it all goes. I like how it's basically diplomacy, relationships, everything they can go over. And then it leads to warfare. You always give other opportunities. You never just go in straight for the conquering. You have to discuss. You have to try to bring cultures together, which it seems like it would be done when it was wedding family members to other cultures. Like a king's daughter would be married off to the neighboring prince who had a bigger land or something, and it's just huge tracts of land, that kind of thing.
Danda need to be executed on the war field. Lord Shiva is the first to narrate DHANURVEDAM as a Upavedam to Yajurvedam. Eventually, sage Vasistha, guru of Lord Sri Rama, wrote a treatise on DHANURVEDAM as Vasistha DHANURVEDA Samhita. Vasistha DHANURVEDA Samhita, Agni Puranam and Mahabharatam written by Vedavyasa, and Sri Ramayanam written by Valmiki. All these 4 books together explain DHANURVEDAM in its entirety. DHANURVEDAM can be broadly divided into 4 different chapters. The first chapter is weapons and training, how to forge a weapon and how to train with that weapon. The second level is army construct, about the ranks and responsibilities. And the third level is strategy of the war, how to strategize both defensive as well as offensive missions. And the final one is the war ethics that needs to be followed all along.
So even then, they knew that ethics of war were necessary because, heck, like what is it after? Well, don't want to name things, but like chemical warfare is considered an atrocity, and ever since it was used, they've like kind of said no one will accept this. The things that happen after the fact, like that is just some of the nastiest things that could happen. Because living through something like that is sometimes, I don't want to say worse than, because expiring in it, because the act that something like that happens in the first place is bad. But I like how it's like, back in the day, war ethics was still a thing. And as technology advances, we kind of get away from it until we see the results and go like, oh, okay, yeah, we need to make sure this isn't ever used again. It's used in the moment because it was needed, but I like how at the beginning, and they structured it good. The weapons and training, the army construct, because you need the training first, you need the weapons, and you need to find out who's good with what. Who could be a better archer than a spearman or whatever? Who's a better commander? Then you give them their positions, the construct of the army. Then it goes into the strategy. You have the strategist take charge, and then you plan it around the ethics of war. Of course, not everyone's going to follow ethically with what is considered right and wrong, but you would think most people would have a knee-jerk reaction to like something that's disgusting. But there is ideologies that are bred into certain cultures and societies and things like that. I mean, heck, the West is no different, where they look down upon others, where they see themselves above. If you see yourself as above and beyond anyone else, you have no problem taking out anyone who's less than. I mean, the Nazi Party did that very well with indoctrinating the young youth and teaching them that they were superior to anyone else around, that it makes them feel like they can do anything to anyone else around because, well, they're less than. And that kind of mindset still hasn't left. It's still around.
Let us understand the first chapter on weapons and training. Weapons are divided into 4 categories. The first one is amukta, weapons that are not released from the hand during the attack, like mace. And the second one is mukta, which are the weapons that are always released from the attacker's hand, like a discus. And the third variety is mukta. It's like the weapons that can be released or directly used from the hand depending on the situation, like a battle axe. And the fourth category is yantra mukta, which are always released from an instrument like a bow and arrow. Based on these 4 types: fighting with a spear, fighting with bow and arrow, fighting with a sword, wrestling, using a dagger, a discus, and a mace. These are the 7 categories of fighting that Dhanurvedam explains in every detail, right from forging a weapon, practicing with it, and how to use it effectively in the warfield. Take archery.
Does he have sting? I'm sorry, I have to look at this. He has sting as the dagger. Yeah, that's Sting from Lord of the Rings. That it glows blue when orcs are close. Well, when you're looking for photos for a small blade, I mean, you're going to end up with a hobbit's dagger.
And
hobbit's
how
sword.
to use it effectively in the warfield. Take archery, for instance. It explains about how the bow, the arrow, the string, the target, and the shooting techniques, all the technicalities of these dimensions of archery are explained in Dhanurvedam. The bow.
Raise up.
Sage
Pull
Vasistha
down,
takes Lord
release.
Sri Rama's bow Sharanga as a reference and goes on explaining how a bow needs to be built. He says that Sri Rama's bow is of 7 vitasti or 5.5 feet, made out of the horns of Sharaba deer indigenous to Kashmir. For general purposes, he says that the bow should be of 4 feet length and largely dependent on the height of the archer. The string. It explains that a string needs to be of a silk thread or the sinew or the tendon of a deer or a bison. The arrow. The arrows are of 3 types: masculine with more weight distributed at the rear part intended for long range, feminine with more weight distributed on the spearhead for short range, and equally distributed weight for practice purposes, the third one, a neutral category. It gives the designs for different types of arrowheads based on the need. The first one is a hacksaw shaped Aramukha for piercing through the skin, Kshurapa for cutting the enemy hands, Gopucha for general aim, Ardhachandra for aiming at the neck of the enemy, Suchimukha for piercing through the armor, Bhalla for internal organ damage, Vatsadanta for cutting the bowstring, Dviballa for dodging enemies' arrows, Karnika for dodging heavy weapons, Kakatunda to create a blow kind of an effect. Dhanurvedam explains the procedures to forge a poisonous effect into the arrowheads. Here is an example. People's tree's bark along with rock salt and costus plant should be ground in cow's urine. The paste should be applied on the arrowhead, heated on fire. Such kind of an arrows will have immediate poisonous effect once they pierce into the enemy's body. Like this, it explains about many other plants and the alchemy behind it to create such kind of poisonous effects. From here on, Dhanurvedam gets into a metaphysical dimension, which is very...
That's nuts. That is absolutely nuts. They have, I mean, you know that they had alchemists. I guess they're pharmacists. Would be considered pharmacists, not pharmacists now, but chemists now. But they had people who knew the ins and outs, and the fact that it's all written down there for them to read and know. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know that people passed down the knowledge from the past so structured, so written down, literally, that everyone can go and see it. Everyone knows the methods for things. I mean, I think that's absolutely amazing. I'm pretty sure there are many more out there that are written down, but when it comes to history, you don't normally learn the little nuances of how things were made or why they were made. You just know, oh, in history, this war happened at this point in time because this person was wanting to do this, or this fallout between family members did this, or there was something that was said about this person and this person took an overreaction, or someone was in charge of a kingdom who shouldn't have been in charge of a kingdom due to nepotism and the whole thing crumbled. I mean, there are many different structures because a revolution happened, but that's the stuff you learn when you hear history. I'm pretty sure there's much more out there that goes into the nuances of like everything in the past, and that's just fascinating. I really need to get back into history. I love studying it because it's fun to see how the world kind of it's a washing machine. It gets clean, it gets dirty. You have to throw it back in the washer, and then it goes through the same process over and over again. Eventually, the shirt will be worn out, and we throw it away. At that point in time, we've destroyed the earth too far that there's probably none of us left, or at least we're completely different than the people we used to be. But yeah, it's just what happens. We're a t-shirt, and the earth is a washing machine, and it keeps rotating us because we keep doing the same thing, getting out of the washer after realizing something and making a mess of ourselves again. But I find it absolutely fascinating because just seeing the little nuances is something I never paid attention to. It's there, but I sadly never paid attention to it.
Very complex for us to understand. It talks about astra. Astra and shastra are two types of weapons. A shastra is a physical weapon like a sword or an arrow, while astra is a magic spell attached to that weapon. Then it becomes an astra. This particular slokam, it explains that there are 7 highly invincible astras in existence. Brahmastram, Brahmadandam, Brahmasira, Pashupatastram, Vayuvyastram, Agneyastram, Narsimhastram. Each astra has a mantram associated with it, and DHANURVEDAM explains it all. It gives the mantram associated with Brahmastram, and it says that the archer should chant it for 10,000 crore times for using it for once in the battlefield. Just because it is difficult to understand, it would be foolish to say it's a myth. So let's leave it here and proceed. It explains about the target. A still archer and a still target is called a sthira. A still archer and a moving target is called chala. A moving archer and a still target is chala chala. And both the archer and the target moving is advaya chala.
Wow, that's well planned out, training-wise.
Last, but most important of all, based on the range of the target and the type of the target, there are 8 body postures: Pratyalidha, Alidha, Vishaka, Sampada, Visampada, Darudurakrama, Garudakrama, Padmasana. And there are 5 ways of holding the arrow: Pataka, Vajramushti, Simhakarna, Kakatundi, and Matsari. And 5.
I just know of a few ways of holding the arrow, and I only know of like 2-3 ways of drawing the string, of drawing the arrow back. How? Oh my gosh, that's interesting. That there's so many. Well, I guess there are many different types of bows too. It probably depends on the bow, but if not, then I clearly don't know much.
Ways of drawing an arrow: Kaishika, Satvika, Vatsakarna, Skanda, Bharata. It's all about orchestration and the timing. Let's see practically how this works in real world. Lars Anderson, a Danish archer, tried to replicate the archery techniques explained in Mahabharata. Here's how he's dodging an incoming arrow, destroying an incoming arrow again in sitting posture, shooting 3 arrows at one shot. This one particularly was explained as the speciality of Barbarika in Mahabharata.
Ooh.
Shooting 2 arrows at one shot. This one is widely heard of, how Arjuna shot a target above by looking downward below. It is also the same pose in Arjuna Award of Government of India. Dodging an incoming arrow with a machete, or dodging an incoming machete with an arrow. Do check out his channel, I'm leaving you the link in the description below. Rolling all the...
Like, I've seen people firing arrows, but that, I gotta say, I like how he just focused on the specifics, because that dude is being shot at by arrows. Of course, they're probably all Nerf arrows, probably things like that. So they're probably flying slower than they probably would originally. Of course, everything's slowed down in that footage, but oh my gosh, the fact that okay, now I understand they were just talking about positions. Well, that's what he said in the beginning. There are positions, then there's the finger holding, the way you draw back the arrow with the way you position your fingers, whether it's 3, whether it's 2. There are multiple different ways, whether you draw it like that. And then, oh my gosh, But he was just doing the movement, the different kind of shots, the different positions.
Way back. What you've seen is just 5% of the archery explained in Dhanurvedam. Still 95% of it I couldn't cover, of course, it's impossible. Same way, for all other categories, every technicality is explained in great detail. Let us now get to the next chapter, the army construct. The grand epic of Mahabharatam details out how the army construct need to be. It says that both Kauravas and Pandavas had 18 battalions of army lined up for Kurukshetra. A battalion in Mahabharatam is referred as Akshauhini. Mahabharatam details about how the Akshauhini construct needs to be. It says that Akshauhinya Parimanam Narashvaradantinam. Let us see what it means. Akshauhini comprises of Nara, infantry, Ashwa, cavalry, Ratha, chariotry, and Dampi, elephantry. Take a closer look. Yes, that's chess. These 4 divisions of the army are considered as the 4 limbs and called as Chaturanga, from which chess originated. What you're seeing on the screen is the oldest written record of how chess is derived from the format of an Akshauhini. Let's break down Akshauhini. 1 chariot, 1 elephant, 5 foot soldiers, and 3 horsemen, all put together is the smallest unit of the battalion, Patti. That's Patti. 3 Pattis make 1 Senamukha, 3 Senamukhas 1 Gulma, 3 Gulmas 1 Gana, 3 Ganas 1 Vahini, 3 Vahinis 1 Prudhana, 3 Prudhanas 1 Chamu, 3 Chamus 1 Anikini, and finally 3 Anikinis 1 Akshauhini. So 1 Akshauhini is 21,870 elephants, 21,870 chariots, 65,610 horsemen, 1,09,350 foot soldiers.
The fact that they'd split up the forces so evenly, perfectly. I mean, sure, there was probably a bit more in one battalion, and depending on which is which, but that just seems so precise. It makes sense as to why chess is done a certain way, because, well, if the armies were split up so evenly, it makes sense that the chess is done with specific types, a specific number of, pieces.
All put together, this is the big number which finally indulged in the war of Kurukshetra. And here is how the command structure in an Akshauhini is. The foot soldier is called Padatik, 12 such Padatiks under the command of 1 Ashwarohi, 12 Ashwarohis under the command of 1 Gaja, this entire unit under the command of a Ardharadhi, 12 Ardharadhis under the command of a Radhi, 12 Radhis under the command of a Atiradhi, 12 Atiradhis under the command of a Maharadhi, 12 Maharadhis under the command of a Atimaharadhi, and finally 24 Atimaharadhis under the command of a Mahamaharadhi. This is the complete command structure.
I guess that makes sense, though. Horses were much more abundant and easier to train to haul a carriage than to train an elephant to be a war machine, which is why that was only at the beginning. And then as soon as they started using chariots is from then on what the commanders ride. And then the commander's commander rides a chariot. Then the commander's commanders rides a chariot.
Shahani. Let's get to the 3rd chapter, strategy of the war. Any war is all about defending one's army, attacking the enemy's army, and emerging victorious. The thought is always stronger than the might, and this is where Dhanurvedam immensely focuses on strategizing a battle.
That statue's in the US.
Based on many factors like battleground conditions, impending dangers, objectives of the war, strengths of one's military, weaknesses of the enemy's military, taking all these into account, Dhanurvedam designs 7 different battle formations. They are Dandavyuham, Shakatavyuham, Varahavyuham, Matsyavyuham, Padmavyuham,
Wild boar,
and Garudavyuham.
fish.
These formations
Lotus needle
metaphorically
eagle
represent the name they carry. Take Varahavyuham for instance. If we expect a danger from sideways, then a Varahavyuham is advised by Dhanurvedam. Imagine a king along with his battalion crossing through a mountain range, and because of the mountains, a stealthy ambush is expected from the sideways. Then more military is beefed up towards the sides, and the front and the rear part of the battalion can have a less number of. So that forms an elliptical shape metaphorically called as Varahavyuha. If you came across the grand epic of Mahabharatam, you would have definitely heard of the names Abhimanyu and Chakravyuham or Padmavyuham. Yes, Dhanurvedam illustrates the very blueprint of Chakravyuham. Let us see how it is. This is how Padmavyuham looks like from the top. The battalions form concentric rings coming out in a pattern of a lotus flower. It has 5 highly invincible features, making it one of the most deadliest formations of all. Number 1. Impenetrable entry. The entry into this formation is almost impossible. The second one is increasing levels of difficulty. As you break into the levels, you need to face stronger and stronger warriors towards the center. On top of it, each circular level alternatively...
I've come across this in video games, that structure, where it gets more and more difficult as you go through and progress. It makes sense to use it on a battlefield to protect the commanding officer. But, well, I guess that's if you're surrounded, that's the best formation to take. Makes sense.
Rotates in a clockwise and counterclockwise fashion, creating an immense amount of psychological trauma for anybody who enters that formation. And finally, if a warrior manages to intrude into the center of the formation, as and when that happens, the entire Padmavibham collapses to the center, making it impossible for the intruder to get out of this formation. And this is how Kauravas and Pandavas encountered each other with their respective vyuhams on the 18-day battle of Kurukshetra.
18-day battle, each
DHANURVEDAM goes on
position.
explaining how to train war animals, how to treat wartime injuries, how to train the military to move from one formation to other depending on the battle situation. It goes on explaining everything about it. And there we get to the last and most important chapter of DHANURVEDAM, the war ethics. If anyone goes through the epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata, especially the wartime phases, it would be incredibly surprising how the warriors in these epics did not kill their enemies even though they had them at the tip of their sword, just because the Yuddha Dharmam or the war ethics defined by DHANURVEDAM doesn't permit them to kill at that point. The war ethics is a vast subject in DHANURVEDAM. Here I quote 2 important principles of war that commands to put ethics before victory or even one's own life. An unconscious or unarmed or retreating or surrendering enemy should never be attacked. Of course, a woman and a child should never be attacked. The ancient code of war is still seen today being followed in Kalaripayattu, one of the oldest forms of martial arts surviving in the whole world. It is believed that Lord Shiva narrated Kalaripayattu to Parashurama, and from Parashurama up until today, many generations are carrying on the legacy and the legend of Kalaripayattu. Kalaripayattu gives utmost importance to the ethics of the war and puts discipline at the center of it. Same way, take Kung Fu for instance, which was started by Bodhidharma, an Indian king turned monk in China. It focuses on having uncompromisable ethics even before getting started with the martial arts. As well, Kung Fu derives a vast portion of it from Kalaripayattu. That brings us to the end of DHANURVEDAM.
Oh,
thank you for watching.
Gosh, that was interesting. I really enjoyed that. That was a good watch. Again, he's a little slow at talking. I probably am too quick. I babble on and then talk nonsense, a ton of nonsense. You're probably used to that, but I enjoyed that. I am watching it at this normal pace because I don't want to miss anything. The way it goes and kind of he drags on, and I just have to catch everything. But that was fascinating. I mean, seeing the fact that he's trying to give us insight on it, and he's just barely touching it. But oh my gosh, you can tell that there's so much more there. He's just like, oh, we only touched on 5% of like the weapons. Let's just continue on though, because you could probably spend, like, I've seen channels where people dedicate their lives to like historical accuracy. Of course, they go off the rails eventually, and then kind of never return to that because they realize they're living in the present life, and present life is kind of not the same thing, and it just things go like that. But as they continue, they realize that certain things that they believed were off, and oh my gosh, you could probably spend your entire life just doing videos, instructing people on the history of, oh, this is the history of this point in time. Of course, I like the sure one brush stroke to give me kind of an understanding, simplicity kind of knowledge. Of course, it's always like the one side of the argument. You listen to another person from the other side, you'll hear another side of the argument, and then you hear someone from the third side, which is someone who's not involved in an argument. They have the third perspective. So there's always multiple perspectives. Now, of course, you go into history and like, heck, there's probably the soldier's perspective of how things happened. There's the commander's perspective. There's the person who writ the work, the history of what happened. So it's always interesting to know that because I've had people message to me as like, oh, this is false. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, everything's 100% true from a certain point of view. I mean, I've always said that everything people hear about me is 100% true, because if someone has never heard of me before and then someone tells them something that may or may not be true, they will believe that thing that may or may not be true because, well, what other source do they have? They obviously don't have me telling them anything because I don't know them. So yeah, I like this. I like how it goes in depth. Well, it doesn't go in depth. It shows you that there is a depth to it. It hints at a bit of it, and then it goes on, touching the key main points. Oh, I like that. I like that. It focused on the training of soldiers. It focused on the structure. It focused on the battle, and then the ethics of it. And the ethics was the shortest part because it's just like, oh yeah, women and children. It's just like a lot of that makes common sense. Sure, that's not always adhered to. It also depends when people aren't actually on a battlefield, whether they're cowering away. And then we have the situation in several parts in the world where the ones who are seen as the ones who should never be harmed are also the ones who have been brainwashed into doing things. And it's tragic. It's tragic, but yeah, I like it. I like learning the fact that ethics have been a thing, at least in for that on that battlefield for a while. They're not a thing everywhere, and everyone falls short. I'm pretty sure people who've been on the battlefield who have dealt with fear, who didn't curb the fear aspect, took people's lives, or they did things they probably would have regretted later on. But it is fascinating to learn. It is fascinating to hear it. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to keep babbling if I don't stop it now. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Toodles!